we are going to teach a little something here, which is actually at the end of last week's Parsha, because there's something extraordinarily interesting here that I want to share with you. So maybe the first thing we can do is distribute those chumashim there. We have some chumashim over. That's for halacha. Yeah, the chumashim are at the end there. Yeah. And let me just get there too for a sec. So we are in Parshat. Last week was Parshat Bahar. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how to understand, how Chazal teach us how to understand when we're learning the Torah, that we have multiple levels hitting us all the time. So just a sec here. To get to my place exactly. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you where we're going to start.
We're in Bahar?
We are in Parshat Bahar, and we are in Vayikra, Kaf He. Okay, yep, Kaf He is the perek. And the verse we'll start with is Kaf Aleph. Okay, and just one sec here, because I want to see something. Get my bearings, so to speak. Looking for the Or HaChaim. We're going to talk a little bit about the Or HaChaim today. And I hope he's here, because if he's not here, then I'm in trouble a little bit. Yeah, we're not going to see it in the text, but I think Come on. Really? Wow, that's a zchut. That's amazing. His family is the person we're going to be talking about. But you know what? I brought a book, and I don't have the Or HaChaim. You guys don't need it, but if someone could give me a Mikraot Gedolot of the Chumash, do you know? You guys know the Sifriya, okay? Because you're not going to have Or HaChaim here. But I will read them. Is there a Mikraot Gedolot, which is, let's see. You want to pause it for a sec? Nothing. There was no fruit or very, very little fruit growing in the land of Israel, and now we have lots and lots of orchards. Oh, thank you so much. Let's see if this should do it. Hold on. But I don't know if it has it here. You know what? We may need another one. I'm sorry I didn't bring it myself. Let me check just to be sure. If it's here, we're in good shape. If not, we need a more expanded version that has Ezra, Sifano, Rashbam, Ibn Ezra, Ramban. Just one second to see, because I don't see him here. We're looking for the Or HaChaim Hakadosh. And he is a particular commentator. I'm just looking again. I don't think this has it. Not all places do. No, it's not going to be in an art scroll. You have to have like a larger, more filled in, as far as I can see. I'm checking just to be sure. It's not here. It's not included here. The Perush is not. We're looking at, you'll see it on Kaf He, Pasuk Kaf He. There you will see if take a look. Okay, so all right, it's going to take us a little time to get that. Thank you. Shalom Aleichem. How are you, Shmuel? Good to see you. We have a big crew here. So we were just beginning to talk about the concept of pardes. So the idea, the word pardes in Hebrew, by the way, what is it related to in English? Paradise. In fact, the idea of paradise, I don't know how it spells itself out. Hello. How you doing? Good to see you, Baruch Hashem. The idea of pardes, where you go through a field and you look up and you see apples and oranges and pears and you just pluck them. But you know where it's coming from, the word paradise, when you think about it for a sec? Where was Adam HaRishon in the beginning? In Gan Eden. And what was in Gan Eden? All different kinds of trees with fruit, right? So that's apparently where the word comes from, pardes. But we're going to take the word apart and look at it in each letter, because pardes has how many letters? 4. So we have a pei, right? A resh, a daled, and a summer. You know what? I'm ready to fire this thing up. I didn't realize I had to, but this is kind of important. Can you see it with the camera? Yeah, you just turn it to it. So we have this word. I'm going to write it as if it were Chinese, if anyone knows Chinese, because we're going vertically. Par des. And we said that par des, I'm not writing it with vowels, we'll just kind of fill them in as we go, okay? Shalom Aleichem. Pardes is an orchard, but it is an acronym for 4 different words in Hebrew, and I'm going to do the first one. I forget whether it's a tet or a taf. Let's try it. No, I think it's... Is it tet or taf? Does anyone know?
That's a taf. Pshat.
Pshat with a tet?
Oh, pshat.
I think it's with a tet. It's not. You're right. So if we were speaking really accurate Hebrew, we would say pshat. We'd accent the T, pshat. Whereas if we were speaking really accurate Hebrew, with a taf, without a dot in it, it's pshaf. Pshaf, T-H. But this is pshat. Okay? That's the first word. We'll get to it in a second. The next one is remez. And what do we know about the word remez? What does it mean? It's a perfect word in English. It translates it hints. A remez is a hint. You say to someone, I'm going to give you a hint, which will give you an idea of what we're talking about, right? A hint is a little bit of the idea, so you can then think about the full idea. Below that is something called drash. Drash means to pull out the meaning. It's not a hint anymore. Now we're like, we got to look at what we see and pull something out. And then the 4th word is sod. What does sod mean? A secret. In other words, the difference between a remez and a sod, in fact, is a remez, it's there, it's right there, it's hinting at something. Whereas a sod is something you wouldn't know unless someone gave you the keys. Someone gave you the understanding. So those are 4 levels. And I would like to think of it like this. In every text that we're studying, we have these levels going on, one above the other. Okay? So the pshat is the simple meaning. I didn't say that yet. The pshat is the simple meaning of the text. In order to understand the depth, you need to have the surface. It's like, I think a good example also, I grew up in Boston, in America. And we lived on a small pond. And in the winter, it used to freeze over. So the ice level is pshat, is the simple meaning. But if you think, let's say in the winter, you're standing on the ice and you're looking down and you say, that's the whole pond. Got it for me, bro? Oh, there he is, the HaChaim Hakadosh. We have here, I'm just going to mention, what's your name, sir? Chaim. So are you named for the HaChaim? Maybe. It's a good answer for me too. Bruchim hanimtzaim harav.
Here's the washing machine.
Here's our appliance man. He's the man. He's coming to fix everything.
Welcome. I thought you'd bring it here and you do it at the same time. Nice to see.
Anyway, so the Or HaChaim was a commentator in the early 18th century, and he was in Morocco. Did he come to Eretz Yisrael? Yes, he did. He's buried on Har Zeitin. He was a person who was plugging into these levels, okay? Many times, people never get past this level, which is legitimate. You're reading the words, you want to know the meaning of the words, that's good enough. But we're not here just to rest on the simple meaning of the words. We want to go down deeper sometimes. But what is so special about this parsha is what happens, and I'll show you visually, do we have an eraser? Yes, we do. What happens in this parsha, this is how I understand it, but you'll tell me if you agree. What happens is, in this case, when we're going to look at it, all of a sudden, the remez pops its head up into the pshat. All of a sudden, we're looking at the remez as we're looking at the pshat. And I will show you what that means. Let's jump in right away. So, Pasuk Kaf Aleph in Perek Kaf Hey, excuse me for a sec. Okay? Who would like to read it?
I'll read it.
Go for it. No, we are in Kaf Hey. Perek Kaf Hey.
Kaf Hey. Aleph.
Behar.
Behar.
No, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a Behar.
Yeah, but let me see exactly where we are. Hold on a sec. Yeah, that's Aleph. That's Kaf Hey Pasuk. We're Kaf Hey Pasuk Kaf Aleph.
Kaf Aleph.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't say it clearly. Hold on a sec. I'll get it for you right now. Okay, guys, are we in the same place?
Yeah, got it.
First word is Tziviti. Okay, Kaf Aleph.
Kaf Aleph. Sorry, we jumped to the Kochotay in this book.
Oh, yeah? All right, well, I'll get
Just read it here.
to the same place.
וציוויתי את ברכתי לכם בשנה השישית ועשת את התבואה.
לשלוש שנים.
לשלוש השנים.
So let me give you a little context. We are talking about the whole concept of Shemitah and Yovel. And the idea of Shemitah is very simple. 6 years we work the soil, and the 7th year we leave it to rest, right? Which is somewhat similar to something else we know about working 6 days and leaving the 7th day to rest. Shabbat, right? It's the same idea, but for the land. In other words, you can call Shemitah, this whole discussion, are you guys familiar with this concept of Shemitah? Right? Where we let the land, we work the land for 7 years, and then the word in English is fallow. We leave it by itself to kind of percolate a little bit, and then we pick it up again in the 8th year, we start again. So it can be considered Shabbat for the land. Just like people have Shabbat once a week, the land has Shabbat once every 7 years, right? So that's what we're talking about here. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so the question becomes, well, wait a minute. What happens if we leave the land not working? What are we going to eat from? You have to work the land to get the fruits and produce, right? So Hashem promises us at this moment, V'tziviti et birchati lachem b'shana hashishit, meaning I will make that 6th year, the last year of that cycle of planting, right? Planting and harvesting, I will make it extra special so that there'll be enough food over for the next year, for the year that it's going to be fallow, the 7th year. Very interesting concept. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises us that that's what he's going to do. And then he continues, he says, who's going to read Kaf Bet? Go ahead. Yeah?
Sure. זרעתם את השנה השמינית ואכלתם מן התבואה, ישן עד השנה התשעית עד בוא תבואתה תאכלו ישן.
Okay. So basically, we're actually in this moment, we're not talking about Shemitah, we're talking about Yovel. Yovel is 7 times 7. Right? In other words, there's a whole nother cycle of 7 Shmitot, and then we have this thing called Yovel in the 50th year. So he's talking about the fact that there will be extra produce to help you last those years when the land isn't being planted. Okay. And then, so the Pasuk, just a sec. Pasuk Kaf Gimel. Who's going to read that? Someone, go ahead, Shmuel.
והארץ לא תימכר לצמיתות, כי לי הארץ, כי גרים ותושבים אתם עמדי.
So there's a concept here that is so critical for us understanding what on earth we're doing here in the first place. Why are we in Israel? What are we trying to do here? Why Israel? Why not New York? Right? What are we doing here? Okay, so Hashem says like this. I'll translate that pasuk. He says, "V'haaretz lo timacher litzmitut," and the land will not be sold permanently, because we have these cycles that are underneath the selling of land and of property, because people come back to their original inheritance, right? That's the whole idea of the Shemitah and of the Yovel. So he says the land will not be sold permanently. Ki li haaretz. Whose land is this, guys? Is it ours? It's Hashem's. And ultimately, and of course the whole world is Hashem's, but Hashem, the Torah tells us, Hashem looks at the land of Israel in a special way and treats it specially. The whole idea of Shemitah and Yovel, this idea of letting the land rest and a cycle, this is only in the land of Israel. This tiny little piece of the land, whatever percentage of the land of the globe it is, it's something way under, like, probably 1,000th of the size of the whole land, of the whole globe. I don't know the exact number. So God says, keep in mind, gentlemen, Li haaretz, the land is mine. And then the final pasuk that we're going to look at for a moment. You want to read it, sir? Who wants to read the pasuk kaf dalet? Go. Oh, so the pasuk says, and in all the lands of your holding, achuzah is holding like your inheritance, you can say also, ge'ulah titnu la'aretz, redemption will be given to the land. Well, I have to tell you something now, a little bit about my story. I came to Israel 36 years ago. I started the first few weeks that I was here, I was learning, I knew some Hebrew, I knew enough to read. And I was learning in a book that had Hebrew on one side and English on the other, because I didn't think I knew the Hebrew well enough. So what happened is, I got very confused. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but when just jumping back and forth, Hebrew and then going to the English, and Hebrew, going to the English and going back. At one point I just said, I can't handle this. It's confusing me. And I realized what I had to do was just put the English aside and deal with the Hebrew that I knew. And from there, when I needed to, I would look up words, but mostly I just did it in Hebrew. That was the most important thing I did in the first few weeks of being in Israel, because it changed the entire course of my learning.
You knew Hebrew before?
I knew some Hebrew before. I say some. I wasn't fully versed. I was actually learning to speak Hebrew as I got here, but I had learned enough to make my way around and understand some of it. So when I came, I ask you guys, maybe you know the answer to this. I remember the day when I came to these verses, because it was 36 years ago. I came to these verses. I had been in Israel for a few months, and I came and I said, wait a minute, I said, Uvechol eretz achuzatchem ge'ulah titnu la'aretz. I said, wait a minute, this word ge'ulah, I know that word. That's redemption. That's the whole idea of everything that's happening now. I had already gotten that piece of information, that what's happening in Israel with guys like you here and the land of Israel prospering, and that we have a government and we have an army and we have a society and we have a culture and we have an economy. This is Geulah. So I said, I know that word. What's going on here? And then I realized, wait a minute. What's happening is these verses are explaining things to us in remez. In other words, the pshat is, V'chol eretz achuzatchem, and in all the lands of your holding, ge'ulah yitnu la'aretz. That is to say, it means that people who were on that land, and then they had to go, they sold it, they'll come back. That's what it's saying in pshat. But it's also saying something about the real ge'ulah. That's the remez level. And the Torah is filled with this idea. But this is a very special place. So let's look. Are you following what I'm saying? On a pshat level, it's saying, Uvechol eretz achuzatchem, in all the lands of your holdings, there will be redemption given to that land. Meaning, as I said, the idea they're talking about, the actual specific idea, is that people will return to their original inheritance. Go ahead.
Titnu Geulah.
Given.
We will give redemption to their land. Like we have a hand in redemption.
Well, titnu, in this case, maybe you're right. Uvechol eretz achuzatchem ge'ulah you will give. Thank you very much. You will give to the land. So we have a hand in that. What you're saying is absolutely true. It's saying you will have a hand in that. But that's on the pshat level. If we go a little deeper, we say it's talking about we will give Geulah to the whole land of Israel. Not the specific chunks of land that were possessions of different people and different tribes, but rather, and not only that, it goes further. When Am Yisrael returns to the land of Israel and begins doing what it's supposed to do, which is a big thing to do, we're not always there, like we haven't been there in 3,000 years, okay? When we get to that stage, we will give Geulah to the whole world. La'aretz. Aretz is also the whole world. Okay? So let's see how we understand this level right now from the pshat, because the remez is a piece of the pshat, of course. The pshat is the pshat. That's the basic level, but it's hinting at other things under the pshat, and that's what we're going to look at. Let's look at the next pasuk. Ki yamuch achicha. Who would wants to read it?
ימוך אחיך ומחר מאחוזתו ובא גואלו הקרוב עליו וגאל את ממכר אחיו.
So now the pasuk, I'll translate it. When your brother is reduced, comes down from his position, so to speak, umachar me'echosato, and he is sold from his original land, that is, he might have been sold into slavery. In this case, if he is sold, he's sold into slavery because he can't pay his bills or whatever it is, okay? And he's sold into slavery and he has to leave his land and go work for someone else, okay? Uva goalo, his redeemer will come, goalo hakarov elav, that redeemer who is close to him, v'ga'al et mimkar achiv. That person will come and buy back the land that he was forced to leave because he was a slave, okay? That's the pshat. We're talking now about actual transactions, people who are sold, they buy back their land, this kind of thing. But what does it also sound like for a sec? Who gets this, the hint of what's going on here? Can you see this pasuk in a different way? Ki yamuch achicha. You have to understand. Achicha is your person. Yavo go yav.
Ki yamuch.
And he's sold from his inheritance. What does that sound like, guys? Who was sold from their inheritance, so to speak? 2,000 years ago, Am Yisrael was booted out of their inheritance, the land of Israel. And there are a bunch of people today walking around who like to think that it's theirs, who are not Am Yisrael. Meanwhile, they came, let's be very honest and simple and clear, they came pretty much in the 7th century, in the footsteps of a conqueror by the name of Muhammad, and they came and conquered and settled in the land. We weren't here. Where were we?
Galut.
We were in Galut. All of us were in Galut. So they came, they really wasn't such a hard job, obviously, because there were very few people here. They just came in, moved in, and said, guess what, that's our land. Okay? Well, this is saying something else. Yavo goalo. His redeemer will come, hakarov elav, who is close to him, right? V'ga'al, and he will redeem that sold land of his brother.
So before it was talking about like a redeemer who's close to you personally.
Yes.
This would be like who's close to the land.
Could be close to the land, but also close to you personally. Who's close to us personally? Family. On the pshat level. But let's see for a second, bear with me for a second, and let's see what the Heiliger, the holy HaChaim says to us about this pasuk. First of all, he says the following. Hold on just a sec. He says the following. Ki yamuch achicha umachar machar. When your brother comes down from his position and is sold, Milamed, says Or Chaim, this teaches she'ein adam rashai limkor sadehu. Slicha. That's Rashi there. I'm reading Rashi for a moment. He's talking about the pshat. Because Rashi tells us all throughout his Perush, he says, there are lots of things to understand here, but my job is to explain the pshat. He literally says that. So Rashi doesn't directly deal with those lower levels. Comes the Or Chaim, just a sec. I'm looking at the wrong book. It always helps to look at the right book. Here's the Or Chaim. He says, Ki yamuch achicha v'chulei. When your brother comes down, and the continuation of the pasuk, he says, Parasha zo, this section that we're reading right now, tirmoz inyan gadol. It will hint at a big idea. And that word remez, the Or Chaim is telling us This stuff is talking about some very serious information that's not directly accessible if you're just trying to understand what it's talking about in its context. That's what the Or HaChaim is telling us. And the Or HaChaim was one of the greatest proponents of the lower levels of the meaning of the Torah. That's what his Perush is. It's not so easy to read, but I'll help you with what he has to say. So he says, Ki yamuch al derech omro. The word ki yamuch, that phrase, is like be'atzaltayim yimach ha'mekareh, ve'amru zal, asitem la'oto shenamar bo ha'mekareh, just a sec, ki, he says, ki kshe'atachtonim matin miderech hatov, when the lower levels of reality move away, this is very high level language, move away from what's the right thing to do, mistaklim hahashpaot umitmasken amud hakdusha. The situation becomes such that the hashpaot, the positive effects disappear, umitmasken, they become miskenim, poor, the amud hakidusha. So he's saying there's amud hakidusha that's coming down, and when this is basically saying in complex language that when you start messing up the shefa that comes down from Shamayim to make the world work, gets cut, gets slowed down. Okay? Then he says, Ki gilato hi biyad hatzadik asher yeh karov laHashem. The Geulah, we talked about a moment ago that someone, the Goel, will redeem that land, right? So he explains that to be, Ki geulato hi, the Geulah of that land will be in the hand of the tzaddik asher yeh karov laHashem. He who is close to Hashem, al derech omro, b'krovai ekadesh. Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, we are the people. Am Yisrael are the people who is close to Hashem. So the Or HaChaim is explaining here that this is something that Hashem will be connected to directly in the Geulah, in that remez level. So he says, hold on. Oh, so he explains. Tov lachem ki teshvu chutz golim me'al shulchan avichem. Is it good that you're sitting away from the table of your father, of Hashem? Is it good that you're in exile? Ask the Or HaChaim. Uma ye'erav lachem HaChaim. How sweet will life be? Be'olam zulat ha'chevra ha'elyona asher hayitem smuchim. When he's explaining, you'll be sitting out in Galut as Am Yisrael, and you're going to be saying, wait a minute, what is life like now? We're not sitting at the Shulchan of Hashem. What is the Shulchan of Hashem? So, that's the top level of it. But in this case, the land of Israel is the Shulchan of Hashem. And that's where he gets back to the idea of redeeming from the land of Israel. And he goes on. Okay. That's the point he's bringing up. Let's look at the next couple of verses and see how we can see them in the light of Remez and no longer directly in the light of Pshat. So let's look at Kaf Vav. Who will read Kaf Vav, please? Go for it.
ואיש כי לא יהיה לו גואל, והסיגה ידו ומצא כדי גאולתו.
So it's now saying, and a person who does not have a goel, someone close to him, he himself can manage to redeem himself. He will, and in the pshat level, what we're talking about is someone who has been sold as a slave. He's sold off of his native land from his tribe. He can redeem himself by working hard, saving up his money, and buying back the land himself. So this is an analogy on some level to the efforts that we must make to come back and redeem the land ourselves. It's not just happening. The other thing, if you say that the Goel is talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he will do it, that's great. But that's not the only way that Geulah can come. Geulah can come through our efforts. And that's something that not all people recognize. Some people think that we have to just wait until it happens and we don't have to do anything. But from here you see, if you understand it on that remez level, and that's the HaChaim, I won't go into the details of him right now, but he sees it on that level. He says, you can do things through your deeds that will bring about the redemption of that land. Okay? Let's look at another verse. Kaf Zayin. Who would like to read that? Mm-hmm. Go for it.
וחישב את שני ממכרו והשיב את העודף לאיש אשר מכר לו ושב אחוזתו.
Oh, so that's describing the process of someone redeeming himself, so to speak. V'chishav et shnei mimkaro, he makes a calculation of the amount of years that the land was sold for. We said earlier that the land cannot be sold for perpetuity, but rather it's for a series of years. And a person gets money for the land, but it will return to him, right? That's how the land of Israel works. The land is not sold in perpetuity here at all. And even in this day, people who buy land, it's not bought, very rarely is it bought actually as a property that can be passed down generation to generation. Rather, it's a 99-year lease. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Here in Israel, today, it's the same kind of concept in many cases. Yep, it's not, you're not actually buying the land for yourself, you're buying the rights to being on the land.
The state owns almost all that.
That's correct. That's correct.
The Catholic Church and
Yeah. Except that we pay rent to the Catholic Church for the Knesset. To the Greek Orthodox Church. Excuse me. Let me get my...
There's a church just south of Guns.
That church south of Guns, they are the, quote, owners of that land, and we pay them something like, $1 a year. Because guess what, folks? We're not there yet. We got a lot of work to do. It is a very powerful metaphor. Shows you something, right? How's that? We're paying them for our land? They shouldn't even be paying us for their land. They shouldn't be here. They should have no ownership whatsoever of any property in the land of Israel. But we're not there yet. And we said that this is a process. But anyway, so I'll just read that pasuk again. V'chishev et shnei mimkaro, v'heshiv et ha'odef. He will see how many years pass by, and he will pay back the remainder. La'ish asher machar to whom the person to whom who sold it to, v'shav la'achuzato, and he will return to his property. Again, try to envision that all these words mean one thing in the context of the actual what the Torah is saying as pshat. But all along, we're listening to what it's telling us about the Geulah. It said, right? Am I right? Didn't it say there? Kaf Hey? Or actually, it's Kaf Dalet. Uv'chol eretz achuzatchem Geulah titnu la'aretz. Right? Okay, so now we're going to hit the clincher. The clincher is here. Who's going to take a look? Shall I read Kaf Chet?
Read it.
You want to read it?
Yeah.
Go for it.
ואם לא מצא ידו די, אשיב לו והיה ממכרו ביד הקונה אותו עד שנת היובל ויצא ביובל וישב לאחוזתו.
Right. So it's describing again in this process of redeeming the land, which is ve'im lo matzah yado. If he didn't have enough to redeem himself, he didn't save up enough money, he didn't have the means to redeem. What happens? Day hashiv lo, not enough to return that land to him. V'haya mimkaro b'yad hakoneh. That which he sold will be in the hands of who bought the land from him. Okay. Ad shnat hayovel, until a certain point, which is the year 49 years, the 50th year. No matter what, says the Torah here, no one has that land permanently, and that person must come back to his land. No matter what. Even if, whatever the situation is. He can't afford it, he can't afford it, he has a goel, he has someone who would redeem him earlier, not. At the end of the process, he must come back. Okay? V'yatsa biyovel, v'shav la'achuzato. Okay? So it's saying That should be ringing bells in your heads a little bit. No matter how long the galut is, gentlemen, there is an end to the galut. Even if we're not worthy of it, even if Am Yisrael is not the greatest sheikhs in the world and they haven't figured it out, let's say even more than that. What if Am Yisrael, after World War II, prior to World War II, 90% of the Jewish world was Orthodox and 10% were other streams, okay? After the Holocaust, what happened? Hafuch. 90% of the Jewish world is not Orthodox, only 10%, which means, I'm not saying, Orthodox is the greatest thing in the world, but it means that people don't even know what their Judaism is. The one thing you can say about Orthodox, the whole range of different people and the different things going on, we're not perfect either. But you can say that at least we have access to the Torah, and we're learning the Torah, and we are aware of these ideas on the most basic level. For many of our brethren, particularly in America, the number that I looked it up a couple of days ago because someone asked me, how many Jews are in America today? Who knows?
6-7 million. Maybe 5, depending on what you count.
It depends upon what you count. So, so I looked it up, and it gave me a number, and then it said the source. The source is the Pew organization that does, and they're not halachic in their definition. What was their number? 7.5 million. You know what, gentlemen? That's good enough. That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. That means that there's what's
2.4% of the population
of America?
Yeah.
Wow.
You just did a calculation?
No, I just looked at that.
There you go. 7.5 million. Gentlemen, how many of those 7.5 million have any clue as to the concepts that we're talking about right now? Redemption, Geulah, land, ownership, sold off. If you do this thing right, you'll come back. If you don't do, and if you don't do this thing right, will you come back?
Yes.
Yes. That's the magic point that people don't even know. The Torah tells us right now, listen to this carefully. V'im lo matzah yado, what does that mean? Maybe the HaChaim will tell me exactly. Hold on a sec. Kaf chet, I think he might even in this language say it. Just a sec. Bear with me as I navigate here, because it's kind of hard to navigate. Well, you know what? I'll just read the whole HaChaim, and you'll follow with me, and you'll understand what he says. On this verse, the HaChaim Hakadosh, as he's known as, says like this: Ve'omro ve'im lo matzah yado dei hashiv. If he doesn't have enough, he doesn't find enough to buy himself back. And HaChaim says, Perush, watch this. Im yireh ha'adon. Ha'adon is the adon of the land, right? But we're talking about ha'adon. If Hakadosh Baruch Hu sees, ki ein koach ba'am. Gentlemen, 90% of us don't know what we're talking about. We're completely disconnected after the Holocaust. And you can even look back 250 years and see that we're already getting disconnected 250 years ago. We're already off the road almost entirely, okay? Ein koach ba'am lisbol havalim. There's no more strength in the nation to bear the burden of the suffering. Gentlemen, look at what we're living right this minute. Right now, our soldiers are fighting in Rafah. And don't let anyone say the word Rafah around here, because Rafah is the Arabic word for a city that is in our Tanakh called Rafah. Forget about it. We don't buy their labels. I never use that term. The name of the city is Rafah. It appears all throughout the Tanakh. Forget it. Just like that city that they call Nablus, which is a corruption of the word Neapolis, which is Greek for new city. The Romans built a new city around Shechem. The name of the city is Shechem. It is not Neapolis. It's not Nublos. It's nothing. It's Shechem. It's our city. It's our inheritance. It's our story here, gentlemen. It's talking about Shechem. It's talking about Rafah. This whole story. But that's kind of an aside. But he says, if the Adon feels that we don't have enough strength to suffer any more of this stuff. V'rabu chovotehem lemala, rosh. And their chovot, that is to say their sins, get so high they go up above their heads. Am Yisrael is not perfect today. Did you notice that? We have the leaders of our country are fighting it out, almost fist fights in the place we were talking about a moment ago that pays the Greeks for their rent. Meaning it's the Knesset is a crazy place, and there's wars going on there amongst the Jews in the Knesset. That's not a very good situation. Okay? But even if we're completely messed up, ve'afes bahem koach hasavel, they don't have efes. They have zero tolerance. That's the phrase in American English. We have zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. You're going to tell me what that means? The United States of America is being awashed with anti-Semitism and no one has tolerance for it? That's what it is. And that's just beginning. I just got back yesterday from America, and from what I can tell you, we are just scratching the surface of what we're going to see in America. But that's a different discussion, okay? והיה ממכרו עד שנת היובל, שהוא זמן המוגבל לגאולה בעיתה. Says Or HaChaim, even if the people are imperfect and we can't handle the suffering that we have, and it's too much for us, the galut has an end. And that an end in the Torah language that we're talking about is called Yovel. 50 years. When everything returns, it's a reset, which means that there will be a reset for the Jewish people from their exile. And even if it takes 2,500 years, which it's doing right now, but we are your guys being here is part of the reset. And it's just in some level, while we are quite forward along the way. As I said earlier, we have an army, we have economy, and we have a lot of good things here in the land of Israel. And the land of Israel is bursting with fruit and produce, okay? But on some levels, that's just the beginning. We're just at the beginning of what we're going to see here. Do you sense that? You sense it? Good. So the Or HaChaim continues, he says, Ve'az, and therefore, v'yatsa b'yovel v'shav la'achuzato. At that Yovel time, at the end of the time of the Galut, which there will be an end, even if we're not perfect, the nation will return to its land toward its inherited land and its inherited place. That's what the Torah is saying on the Remez level, right? You following me? I'm describing this? Now listen to these words. Ki kates hagalut, because the end of Galut, yeshno, there will be an end to the Galut. And he was talking in 1720 when the idea of the country of Israel, it was all a joke. There was nothing here, gentlemen. This land could not produce enough food for a decent population. There were little groups of people clinging to the cities like Shem and like Yerushalayim and like Tzfat and like Yafo, but there was no economy here. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because they're full of it. Because they're not accurate about history. Okay? We know this from the reports of people who came through in those times. We know what this land looked like at those times from actual written reports. Says Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain came in 1864. And he writes that the only thing rockier than the sides of the mountains that we passed as we came through from Shem to Jerusalem, the only rockier thing was the road itself. He said, we didn't see a single living thing along the way. That means not plants either. When we came from Shem, we rode along this road, with horses and wagons. We didn't see a single living thing here. And don't let anyone bluff you that my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather had this land and all this time. That's a bluff. And it has to be someday called out properly as a bluff. But no one's doing that yet. But that's part of the process. I will finish what Or HaChaim says. Ki kates hagalut yeshno. There will be an end to the exile. Afilu iyu Yisrael l'sha'im gemorim. Who's going to tell me what that just said?
Even if we're completely unworthy.
Even if we're not just a little unworthy, not just very unworthy, completely unworthy, there must be an end to the redemption, to the exile. This is what this part, so the Or HaChaim is, he's reading this, I'm not making up those words, he's reading this text, and he's explaining to us on this level what it's actually telling us. Because on this, of course it's telling us things about land and exchange and what happens with individuals and da-da-da-da. Yes, that's pshat. But the remez is this level that he's picking up on. So gentlemen, the Or HaChaim is explaining to us, I'll read it again, listen to the words carefully. Ki kates hagalut, the end of the exile, yeshno, there will be, there is, not yesh, not will be, there is an end to the exile. Afilu yihiyu Yisrael v'sha'im gemorim chas v'shalom. Even if Israel were to be, in his words, completely unworthy of the redemption, it will happen. Period. Now let's ask a question. Is everyone following me what I'm saying? You with me, guys? So let's ask a very simple question. Who is this Hakadosh Baruch Hu guy? Meaning, a normal person would have said a long time ago, give up on these people. They're Rishaim Gemorim. They might be Rishaim Gemorim. They run around, they make noise, they go like this. They worship foreign gods. Why is he still attached to us? Choose somebody else. What's the matter with you? Doesn't that make sense? Why is he still investing in us? What does he care about us? Why are we getting it? Clearly we don't deserve it. If we're Rishaim Gemorim, we don't deserve all this bounty of coming back to this land, of having an army, of all the things that are going on now. And this is just beginning. This is, because if you read the other sections of the Torah and you read it with this level in mind, you see we ain't seen nothing yet. The good that will be in this land for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and for us. Okay? So the question is, why? What's his problem? What's his obsession with this people who are all along, yes, we're going to do the Torah, yes, and then we turn our backs and we worship idols, which is what happened in reality. My wife is an archaeologist. Do I have a little bit more time?
What is the time?
It's 5 minutes of 12. Yeah, I have a moment? Okay, I'll sum up. My wife is an archaeologist, and it turns out that in the old city of Jerusalem, where they have dug recently, and we're just scratching the surface literally there. I work at the Western Wall tunnels, and the digging going on under there is something you guys, if you knew, you wouldn't believe what's happening there. But what they found in the rooms of structures from the First Temple period, piles of idols. Piles of these little ugly sticks they look like people, right? Meaning that when we had the temple and we had the Kohen Gadol and we had the king of Israel, the king of the combined Israel and the king of Judea later on, we were worshiping idols, guys.
What was the name of Hezekiah's father?
Menashe.
Was his son was Menashe?
Oh, maybe you're right. Yes, who was Hezekiah's father is...
He was a big idol worshiper.
Yeah, not just him. Not just him. Apparently, says in the Talmud, Menashe, his son says, I'm not sure. It might be Achaziah. It might be, we'll look it up. I'm not sure. But the Gemara explains to us, someone is asking this question of someone had a dream and saw Menashe and asked him, but you're an idols worshiper. He said, listen, pal, it says in the Gemara, if you were in my generation, you would have lifted up your skirt, literally is the language, and run as fast as you can after those idols. Don't you tell me. In other words, there must have been we don't know what this means, but there must have been some very powerful force pulling people to do idolatry. But the bottom line is this, says the Or HaChaim, even if, God forbid, so I asked you, so why does God do this? Why does he stay with us? You would, let's say you had a son, let's say you had a worker. You had a factory, and you had a worker, and there was some young guy, and you thought he was good, and he said, yes, I'll do your job, but he started messing up. He started drinking on the job, and he was smoking, and he was playing cards behind your back, and he was stealing from the say. You'd say, thank you very much. You're out of here. I'll choose someone else to work. No? So why does God hold on to us? Come on, I want to hear an answer.
זכות אבות.
What does that mean? Explain.
Merits of our forefathers. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Brit,
You hear what he's saying, guys?
זכות,
HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to our avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved them so much that he promised to them that he would never, ever, ever abandon their descendants. He might give them a rough time because they need to be slapped around sometimes, but he would never, not only would he never abandon them, but also he would never choose anyone else for what he chose us to be. He chose us to be the nation of Hashem. And we are just now in this room beginning to understand. We haven't even talked about what that really means. But we got a big fat job to do in the world, guys. We are Or Goyim. You heard that term? Say it in Hebrew how you know it. Oh, tell me, where does it say Or Legoyim? Yeshayahu, but it doesn't say Or Legoyim. It says in two places in Yeshayahu, Perek Membet and Perek Memtet, Pasuk Vav, it says Or Goyim, not Or Legoyim. What's the difference? This is how I understand it.
Light of the nation. Versus light to the nation.
or nation of light.
No, light of the nation.
Oh, so what does that actually mean? In other words, Or Legoyim would mean, well, we're a light to the nations. There's this light to the nations, and there's these guys, and there's this light to the nations, and there's Am Yisrael, and there's this light to the nations, right? We're just one of many. But if you...
We have to set the example, which is why everyone condemns us for doing something that no other country even contemplates doing when it goes to war.
That's right.
They still complain.
But they're complaining because that, gentlemen, the way I see this, and maybe I'm wrong,
They understand it better than we do.
that's part of the galut. Because when we get to Geulah, the nations of the world, Yeshayahu is explaining, there'll be a switch in their heads. And instead of hating us, they will appreciate us like a good worker would appreciate a very beneficial owner of the factory, right? There's a case in America that is a Harvard Business School case study. There was a factory, a clothing factory in New Hampshire, and it was owned by someone by the name of Fierstein. I think it's Jacob. And what happened in the 1970s is there was a fire that burned all the whole thing down, and they didn't have insurance. The people who were working for him didn't have any insurance. Jacob Fierstein paid for months the salaries of people who weren't there, who couldn't work anymore, from his own pocket, because that's the way we are. A leader like that, naturally, the people who are working with him or for him, or however you describe it, would revere him. That's the ideal model. This idea, what you just said, that they don't understand it, they don't like it, and they reject it, that's all an element of galut, gentlemen. We have our legs still in the cesspool of galut. But when we get ourselves out of galut and we go back to what the Torah is saying in this coming week's parsha, which is, if I can jump ahead for a word, and then I'm going to stop. We say bechukotai, very simple, it's not complicated, guys. Im bechukotai telechu ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru ve'asitem otam. If you will walk in my laws and my commandments. I'm in the first pasuk of bechukotai. And my commandments you guard and you do them, what happens? Says Hashem, V'natati gashmechem be'itam, V'natna ha'aretz yivula. We were talking about the eretz and all that. Ve'etz hasadeh yitain pirio. The pardes. The eitz. Let me translate what those words are. V'natati gishmechem. I will give you your rains in their time. Okay, meaning not just I'm going to flood you with rains, but in their exact time where they're needed, I'm going to make it rain, says Hashem. V'natna ha'aretz yivula, and the land will give forth its fruit, right? Ve'etz hasadeh yitain pirio. That's just the beginning. And we'll see this in this week's parsha. But it's a very simple equation. When we get out of galut, gentlemen, all that's going to disappear. All that resentment and envy and hatred, it's all part of the galut. It's not natural. How often have we said there's no logic to anti-Semitism? And by the way, that is a very important principle to understand, because in America, they're trying to fight anti-Semitism. Can someone show me any empirical evidence that any efforts that have ever been made to fight anti-Semitism have any effect at all on anybody?
Could probably show you the opposite. Give me a couple days.
I think you're right.
Presentation for you.
I think you're right.
Only when Israel stands up for itself and is successful.
Right.
That we prove them wrong. I mean.
That's right. But eventually, the whole thing is going to switch. So that's what we have to wait for. That's what we're expecting. And the Torah is telling us this. And so I can leave you with the idea that why does the Talmud tell us the 100th time of learning the Torah is not anywhere near similar to the 99th time that you learned it? Because every time you learn it, you get more insight. And I would say every time you learn it, you start finding yourself looking at these lower levels. That's why we have to learn it 100 times. And every time we learn it, it's more than when we learned it the previous time. Because these are the gems that exist in the Torah. The whole Torah is this way. The whole Torah is this way. And there's some people who are tuned in and understand and have the tools and have the keys to unlock the lower levels. But that's what I was giving you today, to understand. Does it make sense? Questions, gentlemen?
Only in terms of, we usually start with Rashi. I mean, Rashi is mostly Pshat.
Yes, he says it explicitly. In the very beginning, in Bereshit, he says, there are many ways of understanding this, but I have come to explain the simple meaning of the text. But the truth of the matter is, of course he dips in every so often to the other levels. But his main goal is to explain that simple meaning so that without the simple meaning, you can't really understand the lower meanings, right? So that's what Rashi's job was.
You recommend anybody after Rashi?
Ooh, well, everything.
That's pretty advanced.
Or HaChaim is pretty advanced. The Hebrew is a little bit difficult because he was writing before
Malbim.
The Malbim gets into it. Okay.
Malbim's good, more medium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who else? We have in a Mikraot Gedolot, there's the Ramban, who is also very tuned into the lower levels of the meaning, or Chaim Rashi.
Nachman or Maimon?
Ramban. Nachmanides. Right. He describes, but again, you have to know the. Yeah, he's digging into the lower levels for sure. The Ramban, more pshat oriented. Radak is more pshat oriented, but he's in Nach, right?
I agree.
Is there Radak on the Torah? Let's see.
There is, yeah.
Yeah? I haven't really used him much in the Or Chaim Rashbam, Sforno. These are different. You know what? Just jump in and whatever grabs you is the best way to do it. Whatever you find says, oh, that's interesting to me. That means that it's worthwhile to you. Okay? Questions, ideas for the future?
I just thought about the Goel. Which was it? Kaf-Hey?
Kaf-Hey?
Yeah. Which one was it? No.
Goel is described in many places.
No, it was...
But at the end, it's between Kaf-Hey and Kaf-Het.
Kaf-Vav.
Yes, go ahead. Right. So, take a look when you have a chance at the Or HaChaim and see what he's explaining that to be, and you'll get it.
Well, I was just thinking about today's world, that if we don't find a redeemer, like some people would love to believe that the West is our redeemer.
Right.
And we have to come to our own salvation. We have to stand up for ourselves.
That is one of the points that the Or HaChaim makes. Absolutely, we have to do the job. That's not so good for the anti-Zionists. Let's say what you just said. The anti-Zionists say we sit on our hands and we wait until the Mashiach comes and pulls us out of Galut.
I don't think. I mean, go.
Okay, thank you very much. Shar Koach Gadol. Stay tuned.